Talks webinar. We want to welcome our Tempo members, emerging women leaders, and our many guests that have registered and decided to join us today. I know some of you are probably on your third or maybe even fourth webinar of the day, so we really appreciate you being here for this important topic. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Marit Harms-Franzi. I am the Director of Membership and Programs at Tempo, and I will also be moderating today's session. So welcome, and I did just find out that it is Mental Health Awareness Month. We did not do this on purpose, but it did end up aligning nicely. So a couple housekeeping items here. If you can advance the slide, Kelsey. Thank you. So we do have a number of guests, and I just want to give a little bit of background on our Tempo Talks series. So it is every Friday at 3 o'clock. We started this the first Friday in April, so this is actually our 6th session that we've done. We do plan to continue them throughout the summer, maybe even longer, we'll see, but it really is just an opportunity for our Tempo members and sometimes our emerging women leaders to share their expertise on a number of topics, and we're always open to ideas. You can find our previous webinars on our website and then the listing of future topics as well. So we are in a webinar format. So a couple of logistical items. All of our attendees are muted. Your video doesn't work, so don't worry about being seen or heard or anything. If you do want to ask a question or share a comment, please use the chat function or the Q&A function. Me and Kelsey from our team will be monitoring this throughout the webinar and try to get to all of your questions. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists today, offering 3 really different, unique, valuable perspectives on mental health. So we have Dr. Maria Perez. She's the psychologist and VP of Behavioral Health at 16th Street Community Health Centers and a Tempo member. Christy Miller is the Director of Development at Pearls for Teen Girls, and as you will hear from her, a fierce mental health advocate. And then finally, Ann Givens is one of our Emerging Women Leaders members. By day, she is Director of Marketing at Generac, but she's also an amazing, experienced registered yoga teacher, and she will lead us in a wonderful brief meditation to round out the session. So ladies, feel free to turn on your cameras now so we can see you. Hi, Maria. Hi, Christy. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
So, thank you for being here, ladies, on a Friday. We're going to start out how we do most of our Tempo Talks webinars, which is on a positive note. So I've asked you all to prepare to tell us about a quote or a mantra or a word of wisdom that has been keeping you positive. So if you could, 1, just give a brief introduction, and then 2, tell us your mantra. Let's start with Maria.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for having me on the Tempo Talks. This is very exciting for me. So happy to be here. So as you were saying earlier, Marit, I am a psychologist by trade, Tempo member, Vice President of Behavioral Health at the 16th Street Community Health Center. And I am also a wife and mother and a grandmother. So I just want to say that, and happy Mother's Day to all you wonderful moms out there. So I guess what keeps me afloat, and this is really true, I think for at least the past 3 decades, if not longer, is the mantra, "This too shall pass." And I find great comfort in realizing the fact that everything is temporary. And so while that is true of the negative things, it's also true of the positive things, unfortunately. But we can't live in a state of perpetual joy, because we would lose our minds too, right? But I find great comfort in "this too shall pass," and I think that really has helped me not only during the pandemic but overall in my life. So I just want to share that with you.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely a good one. Christy, let's go to you next.
Hey everyone, I'm so happy to be here and just really excited to talk about a topic that is super personal to me. I'm the development director at a fierce woman-run, woman-ruled organization called Pearls for Teen Girls. Shout out to my Pearl sisters on the webinar today. I've got a couple of mantras, and it's related to the fact that I live with both anxiety and depression, which are two very different ends of the mental health spectrum. So when I feel my depression coming on and it starts to take some hold, and in times like this, when frankly the world is a bit depressing right now, my mantra is to get up. Whatever that means to you, but for me it means get up, have a plan, keep moving. The world is going to keep spinning, so take action. And then on the opposite side, when my anxiety takes over and I feel that I can't settle, that mantra is sit down. So if I feel like I am just pushing and not giving myself the grace and space that I need to just recenter myself, I often need to remind myself to just sit and be still. So I would say those are my two mantras that are opposite ends, but works for me.
I love those. So simple too. I think I'll remember those. Anne, what about you?
Yeah, I'm experiencing similar mantras. I love, Christy, that you had two, and Maria, one of mine is this is not forever. So it's similar to what you were talking about, that everything has a season. I get stuck in thinking like, oh my gosh, this is my life forever. And just having that mantra in the back of my head is fantastic. And the other one is everyone is doing the best they can. And using that as my center before I enter any challenging conversation or when I'm being really hard on myself too.
Words of wisdom. Thanks for partaking in our little tradition that we have for Tempo Talks. So now we are going to say bye to Anne and Christy for a little bit, and I have some questions specifically for Maria. So perfect, here we are. So Maria, you are a psychologist. You've been on a lot of panels lately. You were on a TMJ4 panel last night with lots of other leaders. Can you tell us, try to summarize from a psychology level, like what is going on in our brains right now?
Well, Mart, it's a wonderful question because I think that there are psychological aspects, emotional aspects, and certainly biological aspects. And I think your question gets at what's physically going on with our brains right now. So it's important to know during these times and any time of acute stress or elevated distress, our brains are wired to look for danger. So our prehistoric ancestors who survived were the ones who were best at spotting danger. So humans are wired to look for danger everywhere we go. So when we spot it, our primitive fight or flight response kicks in. That's what we call the sympathetic nervous system. So that is the system in our bodies, in our bodies physiologically that are responsible for fight or flight. And we have admittedly been here during a time of sort of we've been collectively in overdrive. So we can safely say that we've been just collectively in overdrive and with an overly activated sympathetic nervous system. And additionally, we are also secreting higher levels of cortisol, which is the hormone that governs that fight or flight response. And cortisol causes us to hyperfocus, and that makes it harder to look away from a potential threat. So having high levels of cortisol, while that's good when there's a tiger coming at you, it's not good to have cortisol levels flowing through your body 24/7. So high levels or long-term stress can cause increased not only cortisol, but cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugars, and blood pressure. So those we know that are common risk factors for heart disease. The stress can also cause changes that promote the buildup of plaque deposits in the arteries. So we know that the hyper-focused is crucial during times of crisis, but if there's not a real danger present, I'm not suggesting we don't have real danger, but we can easily fall prey to becoming overly obsessed with the wrong things. So we then become more prone to paranoia or overly reacting in times where we can be a little bit less guarded. So right now the brain gets confused, right? We don't quite know when to be responding accurately to danger, and there are times when we just need to chill. I think that reminds me of our other professional or colleague on our show this afternoon, where we have to wind down sometimes. Some people have insomnia, which is another biological phenomena observed during this pandemic. Many people are reporting increased sleep problems, or they fall asleep, but then they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't fall back asleep. So we know that excessive worrying affects our sleep and our appetite. These are other physiological or brain activities that are going on at more persistent levels during these times. We know chemicals like norepinephrine, other things like dopamine and serotonin. Prolonged periods of stress can deplete our serotonin levels, and that's not good for our mood. We really do need to have those neurotransmitters, those chemicals regulated in our bloodstream. So we live in a world that's also increasingly interconnected with a 24-hour news cycle. So it's hard for us to put the risks into proper perspectives because there's so much information out there. So how do we navigate through that? And then our primitive brain kicks in and the threat of coronavirus looms larger because we have fast access to worldwide news, right? So when we try to problem solve, we can't do that effectively if our sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. We just simply can't think straight or think with our executive functioning, which is what we really want to activate during these times.
That's a lot of negative effects, no surprise.
Yeah.
And Christy will get into some strategies that she uses, some coping mechanisms. But as leaders on this webinar, on this call, what are some things that we should be doing both for ourselves during this time and then to take care of our teams? You mentioned that you have a team of 50. So what are some things that you personally are doing to try to keep your team sane and mentally well?
So I really believe that people, including providers, and my team consists mostly of providers in mental health care, I have found that offering transparent communications is very, very not only valuable in terms of activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the body that governs the relaxation response. People really appreciate transparent and frequent communications. They don't have to be complicated messages, but if they can be frequent little bites of communication to keep your folks abreast of things as they unfold, what workflows are changing, offering an open door policy. Our leaders should be open to having that open door policy for those who really feel like they want to reach out to their leader. Have resources available to your employees and staff, including an EAP if you find that your reports really needs a little bit of extra assistance. Offer uplifting messages in your intranet. Some of us have SharePoint, right? So it's good to delegate this to someone who's good at positive messaging, maybe a blog that can lift everybody up in an organization is very, very helpful. And finally, acknowledging the heroes at work is a very, very powerful and soothing and very important ingredient as a leader to acknowledge your heroes in your organization. And acknowledging can come in many, many forms. So they can come, through validating them verbally and on social media, offering lunch and dinner, giving them self-care materials. If it's appropriate, some organizations are offering hero pay. You can teach and celebrate heroism in many forms, and you can model what it is to be heroic and altruistic. So we know altruism is the practice of disinterest and selfless concern for the well-being of others. So if we can model that, that goes a long way as well. And also celebrate those who are kind and helpful on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, those are great strategies. And I can speak for our team at Tempo as we've started doing a challenge every week to just get our minds off of work and have a little fun team building friendly competition. There might be prizes involved. So I really like your tip about that.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the community-wide effects that this has and is going to have. You talked about the individual things that can happen in our brain, but what are you seeing across the community? And maybe if you can talk about specific communities, like communities of color or underrepresented, what do you see?
So we know that in communities of color, we see higher rates of depression and anxiety and mental distress in communities where there are low income phenomena. So just socioeconomic barriers in general and issues related to poverty, psychological distress is going to be a byproduct of living in communities that have other socioeconomic barriers. So we see, for example, in people of color are represented, have higher representation in the hospitality and restaurant industries. And other industries where they are still very much at work as essential workers, and they may not have options to work from home. So we're finding, and these are just sort of like anecdotal, we're finding that families and loved ones of those who are still in the workforce are distressed because they face maybe a higher likelihood of becoming infected. So that's always a concern. People are calling in by large volumes right now, really concerned for their loved ones. Conversely, we also are seeing what I think the nation is seeing, which is higher rates of unemployment or people losing their jobs. There's a lot of apprehension about losing work. So financial distress is certainly something we're seeing. We're seeing higher increases of phone calls to law enforcement, increased calls related to domestic violence. That was something we were concerned about when it started to become evident that we had to do the safer at home, because we recognize that there are families where there's violence, and so home is not necessarily a safe place for many of our families in our communities. So we're finding that those families are particularly vulnerable and really need resources and places to connect with.
Yeah, so 2 follow-ups related to that. So 1, what are you recommending to say someone who calls and says they're worried about a family member? And then 2, what can we as people who work in the comfort of our homes, can work on our laptops, call in a Zoom, what's your advice for us in helping these communities?
Right. So in a very overarching sense, we can accomplish a lot by offering support first and foremost. And support comes in many forms, right? Support comes in the form of offering validation and reassurance, to literally giving resources, because sometimes what people really need is information as to how to navigate through their difficult circumstance. We have been discouraging people from looking at too much at social media or media in general, because staying overly connected in that is not always a good thing either. I think your question too, there's two ways to answer. One is how to respond to those acute situations where there might be dangerousness. And then there's what can we suggest to folks who are struggling with mental health? And I think you're asking me about the former, is that right?
Yeah, what can we do to support these communities who we might not see, face to face, but we know that there are problems going on right here in our backyard.
Mm-hmm. Certainly being open to giving them the resources, the tools they need, pointing them in the right direction. I know that Milwaukee in particular has a lot of resources, and I came prepared today. If there are resources that people are looking for, I have some that I can share. If this is a good place to do that, I can share. But really, people really know that it's okay to reach out and ask for help. And I can tell you that in situations where there might be someone in a domestic violence situation, for example, one way to help that person is to, have them make a call or send a text when that person in their family system is not around, or maybe they left the house for a moment, that it's okay to reach out. We can do a lot too by promoting engagement in faith communities. I think faith communities offer a natural way to help folks who feel disconnected, or maybe they're in trouble in their family system. So those are some real simple ways to help those individuals, is to make sure that they're not alone, and there are resources in the community to help them.
Yeah, there definitely are. So I have one more question before we turn over to Christy. So can you talk about any predictions or what you're seeing talk about the post-COVID-19 world from a perspective? Are there going to be higher rates of, people with mental health issues? Obviously, trauma is a big topic. What are your thoughts?
So I think that what's being predicted, and I've been, like you said earlier, a part of a lot of panels lately, and even just as a silent listener to other experts who are predicting that there will be a spike. And I heard someone recently say there may be a new kind of pandemic, which is sort of like a wave of a big wave, like a tidal wave of more depression and anxiety. I think that we have some good reasons to believe there's going to be a spike in need for mental health. The question remains as to what formats will be implemented to respond to those needs. So we have to agencies have to get creative as far as outreach, highlighting their assurance of safety and sanitary practices, because I know people want to get help with their mental health issues, but by the same token, they're scared to get infected. So we're going to have to practice in new ways that offer assurances to those patients. Patients are going to need coaching on telehealth, because I think telehealth or Zoom platforms are here to stay. I think we're going to be doing these kinds of activities televisually for quite some time. I also want to comment that we should be normalizing the grief reactions. We should validate a broad range of fears, whether they be rational or irrational. Pardon me. Promoting those with lived experiences as subject matter experts is going to be something I foresee on the incline. I think mental health hygiene, this is good news. Mental health hygiene may become part of the new normal. So with that in mind, we might see more emphasis on activities that promote the mind-body connection. There's going to be a lot more emphasis on promoting good nutrition, sleep hygiene, exercise, and relaxing, as well as engaging social support. So yes, there's going to be more anxiety yes, there's going to be more distress or trauma-related disorder, but there's also going to be a new way, maybe a more modified way of responding.
Perfect. Ending on a positive, optimistic note. I love it. And I wish I could hand you my water.
Oh, you know, I have it somewhere. I can't remember where.
We'll bring you back as more questions come in, Maria. Thank you.
Welcome.
Great segue to Christy. So Christy, go ahead and turn on your video, and Maria will turn you off. Hi, Christy.
Hello.
So perfect segue, Maria mentioning, the increased awareness of people with mental health issues, people being advocates, being more open. And that's probably a great thing for you in your position because you call yourself a mental health advocate. And it's part of the reason I asked you to be on this panel is because we're friends on Facebook and you truly are really open about your journey and your struggles and just wanting to be there for people. So can you give everyone just a brief history of your story, what you've gone through?
First, I'm going to put a little disclosure out there. I am not a professional. I'm not a clinician. I'm not schooled in mental health, but I am an expert at living with mental illness. So what works for me, what I'm going to share is what has worked for me in consultation with who's had to deal with this and will continue to live with this for the rest of my life. If you haven't had a bout of anxiety or depression or another mental illness, chances are you might, or more likely you know someone who is currently dealing or has dealt with. So just a little preface to what I'm about to share. So I was thinking through, how can I normalize this for people? And I pulled out my journal from 2009. So this was the first entry addressing my mental health that I found. So this was, my kids were 2 and 5 at the time. So I was in the throes of being a young mom, still working full time, like full pressure of life. So I'm just going to read this short little snippet. So this was October 16th, 2009. But it starts like this. Well, here I am 4 days into treatment at a psych hospital for severe anxiety. It finally caught up with me and I'm so thankful. Don't get me wrong, these last 3 weeks have been hell on earth, but in some ways not as bad as the last 25 years of anxiety. I'm healing and I can feel it. I know this will take some time and hard work, but won't it be worth it in the end? I think so. I thank God for guiding me to the help I asked for, and I'm so grateful for the love and support of my family and friends. It's been just amazing to feel so loved. So little did I know then where my journey would take me, and since that time, I've had additional stints in the hospital. I've had 2 outpatient visits at Aurora Psychiatric Hospital. And what I mean by outpatient is I would go for what they call their day program every day for a week to 2 weeks to learn about the physiology of what I was going through, and then really to work with the medical team to help diagnose and then develop a treatment plan so that then I could get myself back into my life. More recently, about 4 years ago, I did an inpatient stint at Rogers for severe anxiety and clinical depression. And that was the hardest because I was at a point where I needed help and I needed to be somewhere safe to get that help. And I don't say that to scare people. If anything, I offer that to give people hope that in those moments, it can be very scary to live through anxiety and depression, but you can get on the other side. And in some ways, it's very cliche. I can remember being in the throes of it and people saying, oh, you're going to get through this and you're going to be stronger. And you don't want to hear that when you're in it, but it is so true. And it's kind of what I held on to. Even though I was angry about it, I did hold on to it when I was in treatment and realized I'm blessed to have access to resources. And to Maria's point, there are so many resources available I'm not going to be the one to be able to tell you what I think you need to do with your health, but I certainly can be an advocate and point you to people like Maria, like Maria's team, like NAMI, other sources in the community that can help you develop a plan to getting better. One other thing I'll say is, for me, it runs deep in my family. So 4-year-old Christy, I definitely had generalized anxiety disorder, but in 1982, my parents weren't, God love them, they didn't know what anxiety disorder was. They were like, just go out and play, quit worrying. And now, you know, I see it in my own daughter, and the beauty is that we recognized it early on, and now she's almost 16 and she's developed some really wonderful coping mechanisms for how to deal with her own anxiety. So hopefully her journey won't be as painful as mine has been at times.
Yeah, I think just, you know, we talk about the stigma of, you'll tell someone you'll go to the doctor, but not that you're going to therapy. I know I myself have even felt wanting to hide that I see a therapist. But I think, to your point, just the more we can talk about it and normalize it, and that everyone will probably feel this at some point in their life, the better. So I want to now ask you about, like, how are you doing through all of this? What have you noticed yourself? Have there been changes? How are you dealing?
Yeah, for me, you know, one of my, we call a banned behavior. So the type of therapy that I'm in is cognitive behavioral therapy. And really what that does is identifies the behaviors that you're either helping or hurting your anxiety because of, you know, something that you're doing is making it better or worse. So one of my banned behaviors in my treatment plan is I'm not allowed to cocoon. So if I wake up feeling anxious, my first instinct is to just lay in bed and pull the covers over my head. I can't do that. I have to get up, to my earlier mantra, get up and get on with my day, establish a routine. And in this environment, it is really hard. I am working full-time remotely from home, but the temptation to cocoon is so much more difficult when I'm not having to get up, leave my home, go to in-person meetings. So I've had to be very strategic and deliberate in making sure that my treatment plan is, that I'm adhering to it, even when I'm here at home. The other bit of advice is, if you develop a plan for yourself, share it with someone you love. Share it, have an accountability partner. You know, my husband, some of you know Kevin, he knows what to look for, and he holds me accountable. Not in a way that's shameful or, you know, mean, or, you know, it comes from love, but he knows, okay, Christy, you know, let's get up. I made you some breakfast, or let's go for a walk. Just share your plan with someone. You don't have to feel like you have to do this alone.
Are there any specific strategies you use, like meditation or yoga, exercising? Are there any things that really can get you out of the funk quickly?
You know, for me, and I've shared this on social media as well, my case of anxiety, and my primary diagnosis is anxiety disorder. My secondary is depression. So how this typically goes for me is, I'll have the anxiety comes in. If it grabs hold, then the depression will come in secondary. For me, once I'm stable and I feel healthy, those are all things that keep me healthy. They haven't been things that have gotten me from a really desperate place to healthy. So I've really used them as tools to maintain my health. And since that time in the hospital almost 4 years ago, I've been able to maintain my health. And mindfulness, meditation, prayer, intimate conversations with people from my church. Those are all things that I've used to maintain. But I'm careful not to prescribe them as cures. For my my own journey, it's been a combination of really great therapy. Well, let me put it in order. God, because I'm super faithful and have relied heavily on God and my faith through this journey. My family and friends, secondary, my therapist and my plan with her, and then medication. So those 4 things are what have stabilized me. And then those other things help keep me where I need to be.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something you learn over time. It's not going to be get it on the first try, right?
No. Oh, and I wanted it to be that. I wanted it to be like, let me just take this Advil and the anxiety is going to go away. And
right.
It's not.
CBD. We can talk about CBD another time.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into CBD. Not there yet.
So I want to ask you a question that I also asked Maria, which is about being a leader during this time and supporting your team. You are a leader at Pearls. You have a team. I think 99% of them are on this webinar.
Hey, Pearls girls.
So how are you mindful of keeping your team members making sure they're staying mentally healthy?
So we are so blessed that Jerry House, our executive director, has set the culture at Pearls to be both transparent and supportive. So people can feel safe to, I'm going to say, celebrate what they're struggling with, because I view my anxiety as a gift that has made me a better person. But she set an environment, and I think Maria mentioned this earlier, to feel safe to share what you're going through. And I think if you're in a management position, there's a way you can do that without crossing the line, right? Because we don't want to get into a situation where we're diagnosing colleagues or taking on other people's burdens or other people's illnesses. Compassion fatigue is real. And in times like this, you have to protect yourself individually and make sure you're okay before you can help others. Jerry just told our team recently, make sure you put your oxygen mask on you first before you give it to your colleagues. Maria also mentioned EAP. I think if you're in a leadership position and you have the ability to bring that resource to your team, the Employee Assistance Program, just another outlet for people to be able to safely call and get the guidance they need for what they might be facing or someone they love. My hope for being as vocal as I am is to have people just feel less shame about dealing with this. I mean, for me, I also have high cholesterol. It's genetic. I take medication for it, and I treat my mental well-being no differently than I treat my cholesterol. So I think the more we have sessions like this where people feel comfortable enough to say, yep, I've got anxiety and depression, if that helps even one more person get better and share their story, then, I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, and we're not done yet, but I just want to say thank you for being an advocate, for being vulnerable, for being someone to lead in this area when there are so many people who are shamed to and we did get a kind of related question from the wonderful Christine Hill, which is, why do you think there's so much shame and fear about taking medication and or therapy?
I think that shame, there's two types of stigmas. So there's the social stigma, which is the prejudiced attitudes that others have about mental illness that's put on us. And then there's the self-perceived stigma. So how is what I'm going through making me feel? And that's tough. Like, that's generational shame and guilt and fear. And I don't have an answer to that. For me, I don't know if it's just the more people talk about it, the less shame there'll be. You know, I watch my daughter talk about it, and it's different than how I would have talked about it at her age. Well, I didn't talk about it at her age, but my kids know that I take medication. They're not afraid by that. They view that as that's what I need to be okay and be the best mom for them. I think some of what we see in movies can hurt. You know, how people with mental illness are perceived in on screen sometimes is not entirely accurate. You know, the perception that people with mental illness are dangerous or violent or weak, or that they'll never overcome it. I think if there are more of us that can prove them wrong and say, well, no, I'm still gainfully employed and kicking butt at my job, and I've got solid relationships, and I've been married for 20 years, and I don't know another way other than just to live your life the best you can and prove people wrong.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just a reminder, if you have a question, use the chat box or the Q&A. I do want to bring Maria back on here quickly to answer that question too. Maria, why do you think there's such a stigma about medication or therapy? Or maybe you don't. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think stigma is driven by you know, ignorance, or just fear, not ignorance in a negative way. It's I'm using that word as what we describe when we simply don't understand, right? So I think that there, especially in Western culture, well, in other cultures as well, we are so our value system is such that we value independence and strength and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And we always have to be on point. It's this emphasis that we always have to be in control. And to have to appear to need something like medication, I think erroneously is perceived as a weakness, which nothing can be further from the truth, because I think that I know a lot of people on medication that are some of the most courageous people I've ever met. But I think that the stigma of seeking mental health and medication, for example, that's driven by a lack of understanding of how valuable those things can be, and an unwillingness to be vulnerable, and a fear, quite frankly, of being you know, perceived as weak. So I think the remedy to that, of course, is you know, information and empowerment and acceptance of that, and reject the idea that it's weak.
Yeah, that is a valuable perspective. So I'm going to wrap up here with you two with just one final question, and then we'll go over to Anne. But Christy, I do want to hear about your thoughts on your predictions for the post-COVID-19 world as it relates to mental illness.
Well, I definitely, we're going to Maria's earlier point, there will definitely be a spike in, I think there will be some PTSD related to this that's going to come out. My biggest fear is that the mental health care industry isn't going to have the funding it needs to meet the demand that's coming. And I don't know that we have enough therapists to meet the demand. So even more reason why we have to be really vocal about the available resources. I think too, to Maria's earlier point, there is a whole lot that can be done virtually. For example, I chat with my psychiatrist every few months. I have my appointment with her, and it's been moved to a Zoom appointment on Monday. And I think doctors, clinicians, therapists will be more and more providing that opportunity for people now during COVID and after, because it just seems to be the way of the future.
Before I jump over to Anne, is there anything else you want to add, Christy, about your journey or advice for people words of wisdom?
Yeah, you know, my biggest advice would be talk about it. And if you're real scared to do that, it's okay. It's scary. But find a person to share your story with. And seek help. There's so much help out there. Don't feel like you have to self-diagnose and try to figure out, quote unquote, what's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just part of your DNA that you're the way that you are. And then I would say, turn the news off. Like, get as little, you know, get the information you need, but don't ruminate on the news right now, because frankly, there's just not a lot of good news coming out. Those would be my two biggest bits of advice.
That is definitely a tip that's helped for me, and getting off social media, even if it's just for a day or two, it has made such a difference. So thank you again, Christy. You can read these amazing messages for you in the chat box. But I know you mentioned you're available to talk to anyone who wants to.
I am. Absolutely.
Provide your contact information, or you can type it in the chat box for people.
I will do that.
All right, Miss Ann Givens. Hey.
Hello.
Last but not least, so we thought it would be fun to end this session with a takeaway, with something you can take with you throughout the rest of your day, your weekend. Anne is one of our Emerging Women Leaders members, and she's by day works at Generac, but she's also a certified yoga instructor and has the most calming meditative voice ever. And I know this because I took a meditation from her a month ago. So we wanted to bring Anne onto this greater group of about 100 people and set you off on a good note for your weekend. So first, Anne, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and just basic 101s about meditation for someone who maybe hasn't done it before?
Yeah, so I've been practicing meditation and yoga for around 15 years. I started from the physical aspect because I had a running injury, and then fell in love with Shavasana. At the end of the yoga class, I was like, what is this? And didn't realize I had a lot of underlying anxiety issues that I'd just been living with and coping with. So I found that meditation was a really great centering exercise for me. And then walking through a little bit of what we're going to experience and why it supports this conversation, Maria was talking about the parasympathetic nervous system and how when we can activate that, it's basically telling the body, I am safe, I am okay. And meditation is an activity in present moment awareness, helping engage that parasympathetic nervous system. So that's really what we're going to be doing today.
All right, so I'll turn it over to you. I'll turn off my video and enjoy this along with everyone else. But yeah, remember, no one can see you, no one can hear you. So Anne, take it away.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is called a practice in your pocket. And this is a quick 5-minute meditation that you can experience at any point in time. So hopefully none of you are driving right now. If you are, please keep your eyes open. But otherwise, go ahead and find yourself in a comfortable position, whatever that means for your body, if you need to move around a little bit. And then if it is safe to do so, feel free to close your eyes. If it is not comfortable for you, if you're still in your cubicle or other places, or if you have children around you that you have to somewhat monitor, keep your eyes at a light gaze in front of you. We really want you to feel your body from the inside out. So for this practice in your pocket, I want you to notice your breath. And we are going to ground in our body sensations, bringing in that present moment awareness. So just start by noticing how it feels to breathe in all the way down to your belly, and then all the way out. And ask yourself, what breath would feel really supportive for my body, my mind right now? And as you continue to breathe, I invite you to notice your body. So go ahead and feel your feet, wherever they're at, planting down into the earth or into a chair or a couch. Noticing your legs, relaxing your shoulders, letting go of tension in your jaw, your face. And all we're doing is peeling away the layers of our day so far, just focusing mostly on our breath and our body. While you're here, thoughts will come in and out, and that's perfectly normal. But imagine as though your thoughts are just cars on a busy street, and you're observing them, letting them flow in and out of your headspace, not needing to chase them. Instead, we're just feeling our breath, feeling our body. And for this last minute in our meditation in a pocket, I invite you to think of one thing that you could let go of to support you for the rest of your day. Maybe it's an expectation you have of yourself, of someone else. Letting go of a conversation you had. And then we're going to take one beautiful breath to release that one thing. Take a nice inhale, fill up the belly all the way. And then exhale out your mouth, let it all go. And start wiggling your fingers and your toes. And then go ahead and open your eyes. And that was an awesome few-minute meditation that you can do at any time. I sometimes do it in the grocery store with my eyes still open, but just knowing that, come back to your breath, feel your body, and give yourself another focus, and that will engage that parasympathetic nervous system.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. I hope everyone's feeling good and relaxed. Now, one last question for you. So I'm definitely a perfectionist. What would you tell someone who says, I can't meditate every day, so it's not worth it?
I would say meditation is a beautiful tool. We did it for 5 minutes and it made an impact. And the cool thing about meditation is you cannot fail. Every time you screw up by going off into a thought, you're actually engaging that prefrontal cortex. So when Maria was talking about that present moment awareness, you're engaging that part of your brain. So almost like failing is a win. Like that's the magic of meditation. So the perfectionist I am as well, anytime that you come back to awareness is a win. And if you have 5 minutes a day, awesome. If you have 1 minute a day, awesome. If you even become aware when you're brushing your teeth, congrats. So don't think you have to do 20 minutes a day every day.
Great advice. Great advice. Anyone can do it. So Maria has sent me all of the resources in the chat. So we will make sure to get all of those out to you, as well as contact information for our panelists. I do want to plug a member benefit for our Tempo members and our EWL members. Kelsey, if you can advance the slide. So we are starting what is called Tempo Talkbacks, and they will be every Tuesday following our Friday webinar, and they will have the same topic and feature our speakers. So for our Tempo members and our emerging women leaders, you can sign up for a casual happy hour with Anne, Maria, and Christy. It will be Tuesday from 4 to 5 p.m. Something that we're trying out. Last week we hosted our very first one related to our work-life balance as a mom topic. So look for information about that on our website. And then I quickly just want to plug our next 2 Tempo Talks topics. So next Friday, we will feature 3 leaders and Tempo members in our community: Kathy Campbell, with Clarios, Christy Garcia-Thomas with Advocate Aurora Health, and Anna Oakes with Build High Performing Teams. And they will talk about their experiences leading through times of crisis right now, what they're dealing with. And then finally, Friday, May 22nd, we will switch it up to feature a couple of nonprofits in our community. Make-A-Wish Wisconsin will have their CEO, Patty Gorski, Jerry Howes from Pearls for Teen Girls that you heard about today, and then Linda Benfield is the current board chair of United Way. So again, these are open to guests for just $10. Tempo members in EWL, it's a member benefit to you. And we are looking for more content to fill our weeks and the months ahead. So please feel free to email us if there's something that would be useful to you during this time. With that, I want to thank our panelists so much, and Christy and Maria, for your just very valuable and unique perspectives. I'm sure you'll be getting contacted once we send your information out. So have a great weekend, everyone. Hope you're feeling calm and at peace right now until you're on to the next thing. So thank you so much.